Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. In this lecture, we are going to discuss the second part of the biostatistics. It's called inferential statistics. Inferential statistics. What do we mean by inferential statistics? They are statistics and they have tests to do to conduct them. But what does inferential means? These are the type of statistics done on your sample data in order to get to reliable results that can be generalized to the whole study population. This is the meaning of inferential. It means that the statistics done in order to make our results generalizable. Okay, this step اللي هي the inferential statistics is done after doing the descriptive statistics, and the descriptive statistics, as we know, they are the measures of dispersion, the measures of central tendency, the tables and figures describing our variables or our data set. After we do all the descriptive statistics for our variables, we do the inferential statistics after. These type of statistical analysis processes are done to assess the association between variables. This is the main difference between the descriptive statistics and the inferential statistics. The descriptive statistics describe each variable on its own. يعني if we come to describe the age, we نقول والله the mean age is equals كده, the standard deviation equals كده, the median range equals كده, the median age, the range of the age is between كده and كده. Okay, we describe each variable on its own. But in the inferential statistics, we assess association between variables. يعني we assess two variables or more together to find if there is association between the variables or not. Okay, in the descriptive statistics, we describe each variable on its own, but in the inferential statistics, we compare and we study the association between variables. Okay, for example, if we have this study title, paracetamol use among university students at the private universities of Khartoum. Okay, in such research, after we do the descriptive statistics, we assess the association between the variables in our study based on our objectives. طيب, how do we assess the association? What do we mean by assessment of association between variables? Association between, for example, مثلا in this title or in this study, we can study the association between demographic characteristics اللي هما the age, gender, the university level اللي هما دي the characteristics of the university students, and the frequency of paracetamol use. For example, when we study such association, it means that we have conducted inferential statistics because we assessed two variables or more together. يعني مثلا the age, مثلا compare the age with the frequency of paracetamol use, or assess the association between gender and paracetamol use, and so on. We study the association between two variables or more. تمام. طيب we come to this assumption or concept called hypothesis testing. What do we mean by hypothesis testing? In all the inferential statistics اللي هم قلنا the statistics assessing association among variables, we have to assume these hypotheses. Okay? When we formulate our study, we assume two hypotheses. There are only two hypotheses. The null hypothesis اللي هو H0 and the alternative hypothesis HA. The null hypothesis, from its name, it assumes that there is no association or no difference between the study variables or between the groups of the variables. Okay, that what does null hypothesis mean? It means no association, no difference. تمام. The alternative hypothesis is the opposite of the null hypothesis. It assumes that there is association or there is difference between your study variables, okay, or groups. We assume these two hypotheses about our research topic or our research objective. يعني if we want to assume these hypotheses in our previous example, we go back. We said that we want to assess the association between demographic characteristics, مثلا the age and the frequency of paracetamol use. In this case, the null hypothesis will assume that there is no association between age and frequency of paracetamol use. يعني different ages used paracetamol in different frequencies, but there is no association or no difference in the frequency of use. يعني we cannot say the age group الفلاني have more frequency of paracetamol use than the مثلا the other age group اللي هم مثلا the older age أو كده. تمام. The null hypothesis will assume that there is no difference or there is no association. And the alternative hypothesis is our hypothesis اللي هو نحن أصلا فارضينها in our topic. يعني حتكون in this case أنه there is, we are assuming the alternative hypothesis أنه there is difference between age and frequency of paracetamol use, or there is difference between different genders and frequency of paracetamol use, and so on. Okay, these are the two hypotheses that are assumed for each association or each difference that needs to be assessed in the inferential statistics. Okay, we come and discuss the p-value. P-value, in the previous lecture we came across this title and we said that it's the proportion that the results are due to chance. We use the p-value to either accept the null hypothesis, meaning that we will reject the alternative hypothesis لأنهم عكس بعض, or to reject the null hypothesis and accept our alternative hypothesis. طيب نحن we assumed two hypotheses for each association or for each difference that we want to assess زي مثلا a difference between gender and paracetamol use. Okay, and we assume that the null hypothesis and there is no difference in use of paracetamol among different genders يعني في males و females كلهم there is no difference in the frequency of use. And the alternative hypothesis and no there is difference in paracetamol use among different genders. Okay, طيب which hypothesis do we accept؟ تمام. Now we have these two hypotheses for each objective يعني that has association. In order to accept one of these hypotheses, we come and look at the p-value. The p-value is a value that is generated from the association tests اللي هو the inferential statistics. They are done through tests, statistical tests. These tests of association provide or give us p-value. The p-values for each test give us اللي هو an idea whether to accept or reject the null hypothesis. If the p-value is 0.05 or less than 0.05, then we are 95% confident that our results had not occurred by chance, meaning that these are statistically significant results. Okay, طيب if the p-value is more than 0.05, then we are not confident that our results were not due to chance, and in this case we assume that our results occurred by chance and we say that there is statistically insignificant association or insignificant results. تمام؟ يعني we accept or reject the null hypothesis based on the value of the p-value. Whether it's 0.05 or less or it's more than 0.05. طيب we clarify that through this example, the same study or the same example that assessed paracetamol use among university students. طيب we assume that we have our two hypotheses to assume or to project. The first hypothesis قلنا هي the null hypothesis, meaning that there is no association between paracetamol use and demographic characteristics of university students اللي هو there is no difference or no association between the frequency of use and age. There is no association or difference between the frequency of use and gender and so on. Okay, and the alternative hypothesis, as we said, it's the opposite of the null hypothesis and it's always يعني the objective that we are seeking اللي هو there is association or there is difference. تمام. In this case there is association between paracetamol use and the demographic characteristics of the university students. تمام. We put our two hypotheses and then we do our research analysis to prove the alternative hypothesis and reject the null hypothesis, and this is done قلنا through the p-value. تمام. The value of the p-value هو the value that based on it we either reject the null hypothesis or accept it. تمام. This is done by the inferential statistical tests اللي هو قبل شوية we spoke about them. The tests done in the inferential statistics are called tests of statistical significance. These tests are studying the association and the difference between variables, and each test generates a p-value. تمام. You just look at the p-value and look at the value. If it's more than 0.05, meaning that there is no association, there is no difference. تمام. اللي هو accepting the null hypothesis. If it's less or equals to 0.05, meaning that there is association and there is difference between variables. In this case, we reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternative hypothesis. Okay, these tests are called tests of statistical significance. Okay, this is all for today. It's a very simple lecture. We have only 3 terms in this lecture, or 3 concepts, اللي هو the inferential statistics. As we said, these are the statistical tests done to assess association and difference between variables. Okay, and this is the difference between them and the descriptive statistics. Okay, descriptive statistics do not assess association. أي حاجة فيها association or difference or comparison between 2 or more variables, we use the inferential statistics. Okay, this is the first concept. The second concept هو the p-value, and we know the p-value from earlier, from the previous lecture. تمام. It's a value that based on it we either accept or reject the null hypothesis. تمام. The null hypothesis is the hypothesis that assumes that there is no association or there is no difference among the variables. Okay, and the opposite to this null hypothesis is the alternative hypothesis اللي هو قلنا it assesses or it assumes that there is difference or there is association. تمام. And these tests are called tests of statistical significance. That's all in this lecture. I hope it's clear, and good luck.